Blizzard has provided the community with a steady supply of teasers for the upcoming expansion, The War Within. These have mostly come in the form of new hero talent tree previews. This week, Blizzard dropped 8 trees at once, which is buck wild. And so is the first talent tree we're going to look at here. Hi, it's Llarold, and I'm going to talk about my favorite of the new hero talent trees, the Templar Paladin. But before I do, the YouTube police told me I am required to ask you to like and subscribe. Okay, that's done. Let's get into this absolutely absurd new talent tree. Blizzard has created a spiritual successor to Seraphim in a totally new package, and I think it might be stronger than anything we've ever seen for Prot Paladin, which is absurd. I mean, that's like a really high bar to reach, but I think they've outdone themselves this time. As for Ret Paladin, which I've also started playing recently, I think it's a really compelling tree as well, and it might wind up being even stronger for them than it is for Prot Paladin, and it might keep Ret Pally a top tier spec moving into the next expansion. I'm pretty happy about all of this, so let's just look at the tree. At the top of the tree here, we have Light's Guidance. This makes it so that you have basically a 2-button combo on your kind of main cooldown for both Prot and Ret. For Prot, that's Eye of Tyr. For Ret, that's Wake of Ashes. After you hit it, for the next 12 seconds, you're able to hit that button again, and then it will recast with a new spell called Hammer of Light. It costs a whopping 5 holy power, which is pretty prohibitive, but it deals basically just a ton of damage. We don't know exactly how much, but a lot, and it deals that to up to 5 targets. It also calls down 3 Empyrean Hammers to deal even more damage, and that is sort of the main thrust of this whole talent tree, is these Empyrean Hammers. Let's just keep looking through. Over on the left-hand side, we have our first choice node, with our first node here, really, Templar's Watch versus For Whom the Bell Tolls. Templar's Watch makes it so that Hammer of Light and Eye of Tyr, so, you know, those 2 big cooldowns, deal 30% increased damage when striking only 1 enemy, and this is a bit of a different design from something we've ever seen from Blizzard before, specifically the way that they've phrased this. The amount is reduced by 6% for each additional target struck, so instead of doing like 30% more damage in single target and then 0% more in 2 target, it sort of falls off until it does 0% more at 6 targets. So 30% more for single target, 24 for 2 targets, 18 for 3 targets, so on. It's really well documented, pretty gradual fall off, and it really just encourages you to get even more burst damage in those burst damage windows with Eye of Tyr and Wake of Ashes. And it really helps fix a lot of the issue that Paladin has had, specifically Prot Paladin, but also Ret Paladin, where they do this massive burst of AoE damage, but in single target, they do this bad burst of damage, and it helps it sort of be a gradual. It's a very smart design. I really like this a lot. The alternative here is For Whom the Bell Tolls, and it just makes it so that Divine Toll kind of does the same thing, but with your next 3 judgments. They do double damage if they're only hitting 1 enemy, and then it's reduced by 20% for each additional target struck. Now for protection, unless they add some new talent that allows you to hit multiple targets with judgment, that's gonna just be all of your judgments, so all 3 of the judgments you use after Divine Toll will hit for double damage. For Ret, as we can look at the Ret talent tree here, you have Blessed Champion, which lets your judgment hit up to 4 additional targets. It does less damage to those targets. So like I'll show off on a training dummy here, we can see just judged all 3 targets there. So presumably for Ret, this is going to have some sort of impact, but unless they're willing to throw that talent to Prot, which would be awesome, but I kind of doubt it. This second part of this talent is kind of a non-starter for Prot, which is fine. Double damage on judgment, one of your main damage skills after each Divine Toll. That's pretty good. I get the feeling that Templar's Watch is going to be better because it lines up better into burst damage windows, but I think both of these talents are pretty good designs, and particularly this fall off as you ascend to multiple targets is just really well thought out. Shake the Heavens makes it so that after casting Hammer of Light, the big 5 holy power spender, you call down an Empyrean Hammer on a nearby target every 2 seconds for 8 seconds. So that's another 4 hammers that you'll get. So you get the initial 3 and then 4 more for a total of 7. That's a lot of hammers, but we're only getting started. With this weirdly misspelled talent, Empyrean Hammer, you get when Empyrean Hammer crits, it deals 60% of its damage to nearby enemies, and more importantly, they deal 5% less damage to you for the next 8 seconds. This kind of adds even more damage reduction in AoE and sort of as a longer staggered damage reduction onto Eye of Tyr and also onto Wake of Ashes. So Wake of Ashes is a pretty short cooldown, 30 seconds. Eye of Tyr is 45. And because we take the talent Seal of Order, it makes it so that just by doing our normal rotation, building Holy Power, generating Blessing of Dawn, and then spending it and getting Blessing of Dusk, it makes our Holy Power generators, including Wake of Ashes, be shorter. See that? Instead of being a base 30, it's a base 27 seconds. That's pretty good. And that's going to have an impact on Eye of Tyr. By default, it doesn't, but as we'll see a little later on in the tree here, that's also going to impact Eye of Tyr and give it cooldown reduction, and that really plays into the rest of this. You're getting even more availability on the Empyrean hammers, you're getting more Shake the Heavens uptime, casting more hammers. It's just hammer, 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 and you're gonna have tons of uptime on this damage reduction, which 5% isn't a ton, but every bit counts, and certainly as a tank, getting 5% more damage reduction as a Prot Paladin when you already have like a dozen defensive layers is really, really good. Sacrosanct Crusade makes it so that when you cast Eye of Tyr or Wake of Ashes, you get Shield of Vengeance at 10% effectiveness. Now, just to look at my Paladin here, which I'm pretty geared, the Shield of Vengeance that I get is 370,000 damage, so 10% of that would only be 37,000 damage. It's not a ton. It's free damage and free shielding, though, so I'm not gonna say no, but it's not a ton. Higher Calling makes it so that Crusader Strike, Hammer of Wrath, and Judgment extend Shake the Heavens by a second, and then basically the same except Blade of Justice instead of Judgment for Ret. For Ret, because you take, show this talent off here, because you take Crusading Strikes, which essentially replaces your auto attacks with Crusader Strike, unless they choose to blacklist this and make it so that this doesn't work, this talent, Higher Calling, doesn't work with the Crusader Strikes from your auto attacks, which it should. I don't see a reason why it wouldn't. Depending on your gear, depending on your attack speed, my attack speed is 2.1. That's without any buffs or anything. You're going to be casting a massive amount of Crusader Strikes in this time. You're also going to be using Hammer of Wrath and Blade of Justice in that process. So you could potentially, I think very realistically, add an extra 8 seconds onto Shake the Heavens. So instead of 8 seconds of uptime, we're talking 16 seconds of uptime as Ret. And on a 27-second cooldown, that is, if we just bust out a calculator here, 16 divided by 27, 60% uptime on Shake the Heavens. I think that's a conservative estimate on the uptime you could get. And as Prot, the base cooldown of Eye of Tyr is 45 seconds. So, if we can kind of see later on that we're going to get Holy Power out of Eye of Tyr, so that'll get cooldown reduction. So even if it's more like 41 seconds, you're not getting quite as much extension out of Higher Calling as Prot. You're probably getting 4 to 6 seconds. So let's say 5. So we're saying 13 seconds divided by 41. You're still getting like over 30% uptime on Shake the Heavens as Prot, which I think is quite good. Pretty strong. Bonds of Fellowship and Unrelenting Charger. These are two options that give you more mobility. I need to stop auto attacking. I'm here again. Okay. Bonds of Fellowship makes it so that you take less damage for Blessing of Sacrifice. You transfer 100% of the damage that you're sacking off of somebody over to yourself. That's, I think, pretty well known. This just makes it so that you would take 80% of the damage that you're sacking off of somebody else. It's not a huge amount of damage reduction for using what is a very powerful group cooldown. Getting 40% move speed from it is okay. Like if you throw this onto like a Brewmaster Monk or something, they're going to tick that up with Stagger. They're going to tick that up to 40% move speed pretty much immediately. That's pretty nice. I think generally speaking, I would rather have the move speed from Divine Steed, 30% extra move speed at the start, and then 2 seconds more uptime. So you could get a 7-second baseline Divine Steed with talent set up for it. But that's sort of this is sort of more of a generic option. Certainly for any sort of solo play, you're going to want to run Unrelenting Charger. For anything that's particularly challenging, though, I think Bonds of Fellowship, just a bit more utility. That's pretty good. Ultimately, you can see we have 2 utility talents here in Sacrosanct Crusade, which adds a tiny bit of throughput. And then Bonds of Fellowship is just totally utility. Shockingly, the rest of this tree is basically all throughput oriented, which I think is why it is coming across as such a powerful tree. Now let's move on here and get into the real meat of the tree. Now, as we said, we're getting pretty insane amount of uptime on Shake the Heavens for Ret, and pretty decent for Prot. And this is where it's really starting to go nuts. Endless Wrath makes it so that calling down Empyrean Hammers has a 10% chance to reset Hammer of Wrath and make it usable on any target regardless of their health. This adds into higher calling as well, allowing for even more uptime on Shake the Heavens. And again, I think I may be like being overly conservative with the amount of uptime that you're actually able to get as Prot. I think I'm pretty much right on with Ret. I think about 60% uptime is very doable. That number may be more like 45 or 50% uptime as Prot, which is pretty good. And getting that many hammers coming down as Prot or Ret, getting that many more Hammers of Wrath available is very interesting. It's probably the thing I've loved most about starting to play Ret Paladin and get more comfortable with it, is how often you get to cast Hammer of Wrath, and being able to carry some version of that over into Protection Paladin seems extremely appealing. By comparison, you have the talent Sanctification, which makes Judgment increase the damage of Empyrean Hammer by 10% for 10 seconds, and multiple applications can overlap. This is sort of the same design that we have in-game in Ironfur, where they'll overlap but they won't extend. So if you cast Judgment like 4 times in the span of 10 seconds, you would be at some point up to 40%, but then some of those stacks would fall off and stack back up and fall off and stack back up. So depending on how much Empyrean Hammer deals, this might be the better situation, the better choice in AoE, but I'm inclined to think that probably Endless Wrath is going to be the more satisfying one to use, just generally speaking. Getting more Hammers of Wrath just sounds a lot more fun, a lot more holy power available, a lot more interaction with other talents. So I would want Endless Wrath to be the better option. Certainly as Prot, it feels like it would be, but it's possible that Sanctification could be better in some patchwork situations. It certainly would be simpler to play, which is why I think it wouldn't be as good. And then Hammerfall makes it so that Shield of the Righteous and Word of Glory call down an Empyrean Hammer, and while Shake the Heavens is active, this calls down a second Empyrean Hammer, so 2. For Ret, it's Templar's Verdict and Divine Storm. So both of these are, when you use your Holy Power spenders, you get an Empyrean Hammer. Well, as Prot, you're casting Shield of the Righteous about every 3 to 3.5 seconds, and you're using Word of Glory. That really can fluctuate, but you're using these skills a lot. 20 Words of Glory, 20 Shields of the Righteous per minute. 21 combined Shield of the Righteous and Word of Glory per minute is not unreasonable. That's at least 20 hammers a minute. Even if it's a little bit less, even if it's, say, 20 combined Shield of the Righteous and Word of Glory, just to be on the very conservative side of things, I think that is a ton of hammers. And when you also add in that while Shake the Heavens is active, it's summoning a second hammer, you could very realistically get 25 hammers a minute out of this as Prot. Now, as Ret, casting about 16 to 18 combined Templar's Verdict and Divine Storms per minute is pretty reasonable. And considering you're going to have so much uptime on Shake the Heavens as Ret, like you could have 60% uptime on Shake the Heavens, that means that you're getting, I mean, basically 60% of that, let's say 17 casts, so 17 times 0.6, 10 of the combined Templar's Verdict and Divine Storm casts per minute are going to call down 2 hammers. So we're talking 20 hammers a minute from that set, and then like 7 from the other. So just from this talent alone, 27 hammers a minute from Hammerfall. I mean, the title of this talent, accurate. This is a talent that is adding an absolutely absurd amount of procs, an absolutely absurd amount of damage, if Empyrean Hammer deals any damage at all, which, I mean, it literally it does, but if it does more than like 2 damage a hit, this talent is basically just sending your damage numbers to the moon. Undisputed Ruling makes it so that Hammer of Light, the 5 holy power main core ability of this whole tree, applies Judgment to all the targets it hits. Now, it doesn't say it casts it, it says it applies it, so I assume it just means it applies the debuff, and it increases your haste by 15% for 6 seconds. This is like a mini Bloodlust on use of this big cooldown. For Ret in particular, with it being available basically every 27 seconds, that is pretty good, and it synergizes really nicely with all the rest of your burst. And it makes Eye of Tyr grant 3 holy power, which really fixes the big problem of this talent tree of Hammer of Light costing 5 holy power, which seems like a non-starter for Prot, but knowing that you're getting 3 holy power out of Eye of Tyr I don't think that's an issue at all anymore. You have 2 holy power built up, you cast Eye of Tyr, you immediately hit Hammer of Light, you've burned all of your holy power out, you're now doing tons of damage, you're proccing tons of hammers, or tons of Empyrean hammers, you're getting tons of damage reduction procs and AoE damage procs from this weirdly spelled talent over here. It's all great. And finally, the thing that really brings everything together, we're casting, we're getting 50 plus hammers a minute as Ret and probably 40 plus hammers a minute as Prot. We have the final talent here, Light's Deliverance. You gain a stack of Light's Deliverance when you call down an Empyrean hammer. At 50 stacks, casting Hammer of Light empowers you for 12 seconds to cast Hammer of Light an additional time for free. So you're able to essentially just roll them one after another. This creates a positive feedback loop. It's the thing that we've always loved in Prot Warrior. It's the thing that has made Prot Paladin so insanely strong in this expansion. All of these positive feedback loop talents where spending holy power reduces your cooldowns, and those cooldowns increase your holy power generation so that you have them available more to reduce your to reduce their own cooldowns more often. Really strong stuff. And this is basically the same philosophy that's been baked into every aspect of this entire talent tree. This is one of the most crazy, powerful things I've ever seen. I wouldn't be surprised to see it get changed or reworked in some way, but the philosophy is incredibly appealing. The number of hammers that this is able to summon blows my mind. I mean, literally over 50 hammers a minute. So realistically, you could be triggering this Light's Deliverance as Ret on every other Hammer of Light. Absurd. It's really, really stunning just how crazy they've gone with this. We don't know exactly how much damage Empyrean hammers and Hammer of Light are going to deal. Obviously, that's one of the first things we're going to want to test, but just the baseline design here is genuinely stupefying. How much damage it looks like it's going to be able to add, how many damage procs it's going to be able to add, and just what an incredibly cool design concept this is. The flow of this, being able to get these like double ability taps in a row, getting this massive cooldown on top of a major offensive cooldown in Wake of Ashes, or frankly a major offensive cooldown in Eye of Tyr. And then just the design of some of these talents like Templar's Watch, adding more damage in single target and gradually falling off, is something that I've really wanted to see, and I'm really happy to see this here. It really makes me excited to see this same design used in other abilities and other talents. I think it is a really promising tree that really has me excited for some of the, what's to come next. Ultimately, this is so stunning that, like, if this is the only good thing that comes here, that's okay. Play Paladin, basically. Always a good philosophy, right? They're always pretty strong and they're pretty fun to play, and it looks like this is going to be no exception. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye.